So we walked up to him and we were walking around with him and I took his hand.
And whose idea was it to walk towards him?
Mine.
Was it?
Then it was Robert's idea to kill him.
On Friday, February 12th, 1993, a 2-year-old boy was shopping with his mother at the new Strand Shopping Centre in Bootle, Merseyside, England, a town in the Liverpool city region. It was a normal day until the mother turned away from her son for a few seconds to pay for her items. This is when an unimaginable nightmare unfolded at the hands of two 10-year-old boys that is hard for even the most conditioned or desensitized person to comprehend. A nightmare sparking nationwide debate and controversy in England, a nightmare that no one should have to face, especially a parent. A warning before we start this story, this is one of the most disturbing true crime cases I have ever heard. The case involves graphic details of torture and murder. It's not for the faint of heart, so I would maybe check out some of my other videos that aren't so graphic if this kind of content disturbs you. Welcome to Dredge a Reality, where we talk about crazy facts, mysteries, and scary stories we've dredged from reality. Please subscribe to our channel, hit the bell notification and the like button so you don't miss any content we've dredged up for you. Now let's get to digging. On February 12, 1993, a woman from Kirkby, England named Denise headed out from her home for a day of shopping with her 2-year-old son James. They made their way from Kirkby to the new Strand Shopping Centre in Bootle, Merseyside, England. This was about a 16-minute drive from their home. Denise made this drive with her son to spend time with him and get some shopping done. The shopping mall was extremely crowded at the time, and James was so excited to be in the crowd of people. He would hold his mother's hand, but every once in a while run a few yards ahead of her, but always staying in her line of sight. They did some shopping for a while and eventually made their way to A.R. Tim's butcher shop on the lower floor of the shopping center. Around 3:40 p.m., Denise was wrapping up her shopping and headed to the register to pay for her pork chops. This is when she let go of her son James's hand momentarily to count the money. She then paid and looked towards where her son was standing, and he was gone, a parent's worst nightmare. As she went looking for her son, panic ensued. She frantically looked for her baby boy. Every second that passed, the more anxious she got. Where was her son? She just saw him a few seconds ago. After looking for a while, she was finally forced to contact authorities. Police arrived and started gathering as much information as possible. Police looked through CCTV footage and saw 2-year-old James being taken by 2 older boys. The boys held James's hand and led him out of the shopping center. The police released the footage to the public to see if anyone could identify them. The family and police frantically searched for James for 2 days. James's mother Denise and father Ralph were obviously in extreme distress. On the second day he was missing, which was on Sunday, February 14th, 1993, James's mother Denise was called to the local police station. As Denise is standing in the police station for over 40 minutes, which I'm sure feels like a lifetime in a situation like this, a police officer investigating the case, Jeff McDonald, came to her and told her they found James, but it wasn't good. Denise braced herself for what was about to come. The police officer told her that James's body had been discovered, and she began to weep. He was found by some children as they played next to some railroad tracks just 200 yards from the Walton police station in Walton, Liverpool. His body had been severed by the train. James's body was sent to forensic pathologist Dr. Alan Williams for an autopsy. He determined that James died before he was struck by the train. Williams discovered 10 skull fractures, 22 bruises, splits and grazes on James's face and head, 20 more wounds on his body, and blue paint in his left eye. Williams was not able to determine which blow was the fatal blow, but one thing was known: we had a murderer on the loose. Detective Superintendent Albert Kirby of the Merseyside Police was in charge of the investigation, and he was determined to find James's murderers. Detective Kirby told the Liverpool Echo newspaper that the biggest thing was having to accept the possibility that the people who had murdered James were going to be very young. He also said, "We thought what had happened with the body, that it had to be the work of an adult. It was very difficult to get our minds around the potential situation that we would be dealing with two young boys. Soon after the discovery of James's body, bunches of flowers were placed on the railway embankment where his body was discovered. The people of Liverpool were mourning and angry. Who could be responsible for this horrendous crime? Police were interviewing potential suspects from tips that were pouring in. One innocent boy was questioned and detained, but eventually released. The family of the boy had to flee the city of Liverpool due to threats from vigilantes, but they had the wrong boy. Eventually, a woman saw the enhanced footage of the two boys leading James out of the shopping center. She recognized one of the boys leading him out as Jon Venables, a 10-year-old. She contacted the police and said she had seen him skipping school with his friend Robert Thompson in Bootle area the day of the murder. They were both arrested the same day. Rewind back to earlier in the day on February 12, 1993. Thompson and Venables, both 10 years old, were skipping school and hanging out at the new Strand Shopping Centre in Bootle. While at the center, they were going to different shops and shoplifting. They stole candy, blue modeling paint, batteries, and a troll doll. But this wasn't anything compared to the vile, dark things they had planned. The boys continued walking around the shopping center for a while. Around 3:40 p.m. that day, they were on the lower floor of the center, right next to A.R. Tim's butcher shop. This is when they noticed Denise paying and her 2-year-old son James wandering around and took advantage of the situation. Just a split second of her letting go of his hand and looking away, these monsters pounced. Venables walked into the shop and grabbed 2-year-old James by the hand and led him away from his mother. James, being 2 years old, trusted him. The boys were seen on CCTV at 3:42 p.m. walking away from the shop towards the exit of the shopping center, Venables holding James's hand and Thompson walking in front of them. Thompson and Venables exited the shopping center with James and walked about a quarter of a mile to the nearby Leeds and Liverpool Canal. This is where they started pushing and kicking James. They also picked him up and dropped him on his head, causing injuries to his face. As the 10-year-olds did this to James, they joked about pushing him into the canal. An eyewitness happened to see them at the canal, presumably after they had dropped James on his head. The witness reported that 2-year-old James was crying his eyes out. The boys continued their walk across Liverpool. They walked at least 2.5 miles, stopping at a pet shop along the way, but being kicked out. On the walk, they were seen by at least 38 people, with only 2 intervening and the rest doing absolutely nothing. A sign of how society can truly be sometimes. When Thompson and Venables were confronted by the 2 people, they told one that James was their little brother, and they told the other person that James was lost and they were taking him to the police station. They eventually ended up on the street right across from Walton Police Station in Liverpool. They hesitated for a couple of minutes and proceeded to lead James up a steep bank to some railroad tracks near the now former Walton and Anfield Railroad Station. This was nearby to the Walton Park Cemetery. At the railroad tracks, the boys' aggression had grown towards the 2-year-old. One of the boys reached into their pocket and pulled out blue modeling paint they had stolen earlier from the shopping center. He then opened up the paint and threw it into James's left eye. Thompson and Venables then kicked him and stomped him. They took his clothes off from the waist down. They threw bricks and stones at him over and over again. As they were taking turns beating him, they put the stolen batteries they had stolen earlier in the day in his mouth. Investigators also think they inserted the batteries into his anus as well. Finally, the 10-year-olds retrieved a 22-pound fish plate or joint bar, which is a metal connecting plate used to bolt the ends of 2 rails into a continuous track. They repeatedly dropped the 22-pound bar on James's head until he was dead. He sustained 10 skull fractures as a result of the bar striking his head. The forensic pathologist Alan Williams could not identify the fatal blow. Thompson and Venables laid James's body across the railroad tracks and weighed it down with rubble. They did this in hopes the train would hit the body and look like an accident. After they left James's body, it was cut in half by a train. This is when a group of playing children found James's body 2 days later. Pathologist Alan Williams reported that James's foreskin had been forcibly pulled back. This information, along with James being found with no pants, made police suspect that the boys had SA'd him. After Thompson and Venables' arrest, detectives and child psychiatrist Eileen Vizard would try to question the 10-year-old murderers, but they were reluctant to give details. Forensic testing showed both boys had blue paint on their clothing that matched the blue paint in James's eye and on his body. Both 10-year-olds also had blood on their shoes that was matched to James's blood through DNA testing. There was blue paint marks on the toe cap of Venables' shoes that suggest he used excessive force kicking James. There was also a shoe pattern on James's right cheek that matched the pattern on the shoes that Thompson was wearing, so there was no question that both 10-year-olds had a part in the murder. Eventually, detectives got them to talk. Thompson blamed Venables for killing 2-year-old James, and Venables blamed Thompson for being the killer. They both admitted to having a hand in taking the young boy, but blamed the other one for the actual murder.
So we walked up to him and we were walking around with him and I took his hand.
And whose idea was it to walk towards him?
Mine.
Was it?
Then it was Robert's idea to kill him. We went outside to the canal.
What for?
Don't know, we said let's throw him in the water. He was persuading him, he said kneel down and let's look at the water and all that, but he wouldn't. Because when we wouldn't get him down, Robert kicked him up and threw him on the floor, and that's where he got his bump on his head. We took him on the railing shop and started throwing bricks at him. I didn't throw any bricks, because Robert said pick a brick up and throw it, and I just threw it on the floor.
What was Robert saying while he was doing all this?
He was saying stay down, you stupid dick, and all that.
Why did he want him to stay down?
Don't know. Wanted him dead, probably.
Where did the stones in the bar hit him?
In the head.
And you said the bar knocked him out?
Yeah. Onto the railway track.
And what happened then?
No, he was just lying there.
Who was he with?
No,
Little James.
his mum.
With his mum. He was just running around, was he, James?
Yeah.
Will you tell me exactly, slowly, right?
He was just like coming, and then he grabbed his hands and walked up the Strand.
How did he come up to John?
How did he come up to John?
James.
No, he was walking around the Strand.
Who was? James?
The baby.
Was he?
I told him to take him back.
You did what?
Told him to take him back.
You told him to take it back?
No,
All right,
blame.
Bobby. No,
It's
you're
all
not
right,
getting
Bobby.
all the blame. I'm just asking you, son. I'm trying to find the truth.
You always get the blame.
You see, little James is following you up on stage, right? But on another picture, John, it appears as if John had hold of his hand.
Yeah, well, why are you questioning me and John as well?
John saying to us that he wasn't down at the Strand.
But we were.
I know you were at the Strand, but why should he lie to us by saying that he wasn't in the Strand? He's scared of saying that he was down in the Strand because something happened, didn't it?
Not the baby got took.
Yeah.
Not by me.
We certainly admitted throwing stones and things like that.
But he's blaming you for a lot of things.
Yeah, but why
You
is it
understand?
blaming me?
Well, I want to know the truth, right? The whole truth. There's other things going on, isn't there? I know the truth. I believe I know the truth.
I was there.
That's
You
right.
waved.
Correct, but I know that a lot of things that have gone on.
Yeah, well, how do you know it was me that killed him? It wasn't. I never even killed him. I'm gonna end up getting all the blame because I've got blood on me.
We're asking you, son, and we want you to tell us the truth, that's all. Not give the blame to you or anything else. But it's only the truth that we're
Yeah, but
concerned
Johnny
about.
threw a brick in his face.
Head of Investigation Detective Albert Kirby of the Merseyside Police said they knew they were dealing with younger boys as the suspects due to the CCTV footage, but were shocked to find out they were so young. Authorities thought they were dealing with teenagers. I mean, no one would expect two 10-year-old boys to be capable of such horrendous acts. On February 20th, 1993, the 10-year-olds were officially charged with the murder and abduction of 2-year-old James Bulger, shocking Liverpool and the whole nation of England to its core. The boys then appeared before the South Sefton Youth Court on February 22, 1993. While they were awaiting trial, they were held in secure units. After their arrest, in the media accounts of the boys, they were referred to as Child A, which was Thompson, and Child B, which was Venables. Their identities were kept secret during the entirety of the trial. During the boys' initial court appearances at the Magistrates' Court in the Metropolitan Borough of Sefton, around 500 protesters gathered outside in protest. The full trial started on November 1st, 1993 at the Sessions House in Preston, Lancashire, England. The trial was conducted as an adult trial, with the boys set in raised chairs so they could see out of the dock designed for adults. The boys were also accompanied by 2 social workers and guards. They were separated from their families during the trial, but they were still within touching distance of them. The boys were not only charged with the murder and abduction of James, they were also being charged with attempted abduction due to new information being brought to the attention of the authorities. It had came to light that Thompson and Venables had attempted to lead away another 2-year-old boy from the shopping center the same day that 2-year-old James was abducted, but they had been stopped by the boy's mother. The boys continued to deny that they were responsible for the attempted abduction, and murder, even though police interrogation has them admitting to the abduction but blaming the other for the murder. The trial sparked nationwide debate. Should the 10-year-olds be tried as adults? During the trial, lead prosecutors rebutted the defense of infancy, which presumes that young children can't be held legally responsible for their actions. The court considered Thompson and Venables to be capable of mischievous discretion, which means the boys were mature enough to comprehend that they were doing something seriously wrong and could be charged with criminal intent. A child psychiatrist named Aline Vizard, who interviewed Thompson before the trial, was asked during the trial if Thompson knew the difference between right and wrong, if he knew it was wrong to take a child from his mother and cause injury to him. Vizard replied by saying, "If the issue is on the balance of probabilities, I think I can answer with certainty," confirming that she believes he knew what he was doing. She also said that Thompson was suffering from PTSD after the murder of James. Venables was interviewed by Susan Bailey before the trial. Bailey was the Home Office's forensic psychiatrist. She said that Venables for sure knew the difference between right and wrong. During the trial against the 10-year-olds, tape recordings by police of their interrogation were played. There was more than 20 hours of tape recordings. The boys did not speak during the trial, so the case against them was mainly painted with the interrogation recordings. Thompson was considered to have taken the lead role in the abduction process, even though Venables was the one holding James's hand, leading him away. It was also Venables' idea to take James to the railroad. Venables' solicitor Lawrence Lee went on to say that Thompson was one of the most frightening children he had ever seen, even going on to compare him to Pied Piper, an old legend of a man that lured children away with his magic pipe after not being paid for his services of rat extermination in the Middle Ages. Venables had some odd moments during his trial. After one appearance in court, he stripped all of his clothes off and said, "I can smell James like a baby smell." Venables also described how James liked him holding his hand and allowing him to pick him up on the journey to the murder scene. During the trial, prosecutors submitted several items as evidence, including a box of 27 bricks, blood-stained stones, James's underpants, and a 22-pound rusty fish plate joint bar used to bolt rails together. Forensic pathologist Dr. Alan Williams spent 33 minutes outlining all the injuries sustained by James, which was 10 skull fractures, 22 bruises, splits and grazes to James's face and head, 20 more wounds to his body, and blue paint in his left eye. Williams also said he had many injuries to his legs, which had been inflicted after James was stripped from the waist down. He also had extensive brain damage, which included a hemorrhage. On November 24th, 1993, the boys, both age 11 by this point, were found guilty of the murder of James Bulger, making them the youngest convicted murderers of the 20th century. Judge Mr. Justice Moreland sentenced them to be detained at Her Majesty's pleasure, recommending they should be kept in custody very, very many years to come. He sentenced them to a minimum of 8 years. Justice Moreland told the boys they had committed a crime of unparalleled evil and barbarity, going on to tell them their conduct was both cunning and very wicked. At the close of the trial, the judge lifted the reporting restrictions and allowed the names of the killers to be released, saying, "I did this because the public's interest overrode the interest of the defendants. There was a need for an informed public debate on crimes committed by young children." After the release of the 10-year-old murderers' names, their families had to be given new identities and moved across England to protect them from vigilantes. Shortly after the trial, Lord Taylor of Gosforth, the Lord Chief Justice, recommended that the boys at least serve a minimum of 10 years, which would make them eligible for release at the age of 20 in February of 2003. This recommendation was honored. Shortly after, the editors for The Sun, which is a British tabloid, started a petition in a bid to increase the time spent by both boys in custody. They collected over 280,000 signatures and handed the petition over to Michael Howard, the Home Secretary. The petition was successful, and in July of 1994, sentencing got changed to a minimum of 15 years in custody. This meant the boys wouldn't be eligible for release until February of 2008, when they were both 25 years old. Lord Donaldson criticized Howard's intervention, saying it was nothing but an institutionalized vengeance by a politician playing to the gallery. The increased minimum term was overturned in 1997 by the House of Lords. They ruled it unlawful for the Home Secretary to decide on minimum sentences for young offenders. Sir John Major, former Prime Minister of the UK from 1990 to 1997, said that society needs to condemn more and understand a little less. The trial judge, Justice Moreland, said that the exposure to violent videos might have encouraged the actions of Thompson and Venables. This was disputed by David McLean, the Minister of State at the Home Office. David McLean went on to say that the police didn't have any evidence linking the boys to violent videos or video nasties, which are low-budget horror or exploitation films distributed on video cassette in the early 1980s. Some British tabloids claim that the attacks on James could have been inspired by Child's Play 3. Investigators did find out that Child's Play 3 was rented by Venables' father months prior to the murder, but it was not known if the 10-year-old actually watched it. One of the reasons tabloids were trying to blame Child's Play 3 is because the movie has a scene where Chucky was being splashed with blue paint during a paintball game. A Merseyside detective said they went through more than 200 titles rented by the Venables family, and although some films being disturbing, they found nothing that could influence a child to go out and commit murder. Following the trial and sentencing, Thompson was detained at Barton Moss Secure Children's Home in Safford. Venables was detained in Vardy Home, a small 8-bedded unit at Red Bank Secure Unit in St. Helens on Merseyside. Their locations were not publicly known until after the boys' release. The boys were taught to keep their names private and the crimes they committed, which resulted in them being in the units. Venables' parents knew where their child was being detained and visited him often. Thompson's mother also visited him every 3 days he was detained. The boys received education and rehabilitation while detained. Both boys were reported to have PTSD, and Venables claiming to experience nightmares and flashbacks of the murder. In 1999, Thompson and Venables' lawyers appealed to the European Court of Human Rights that the boys didn't receive a fair trial and were too young to follow proceedings and understand an adult court, claiming an inhuman and degrading treatment. Something like maybe James experienced? The court dismissed their claim that the trial was inhumane and degrading treatment, but agreed that it wasn't a fair trial. The court also said the Home Secretary's intervention in 1994 had caused a highly charged atmosphere. They claimed this resulted in an unfair judgment. On March 15, 1999, the court said that there had been a violation of Article 6 of the European Convention on Human Rights, which regards the fairness of a trial of children. They stated the public trial process in an adult court must be regarded in the case of an 11-year-old as a severely intimidating procedure. In September 1999, James's parents appealed the European Court of Human Rights, stating that the victim of the crime has the right to be involved in determining the sentencing of the perpetrator. This failed to persuade the court. In June of 2001, the parole board ruled the boys were no longer a threat to public safety and could be released. Home Secretary David Blunkett approved the decision, and they were released a few weeks later after serving 8 years. Both boys were given new identities and moved to secret locations on a witness relocation type program. Plunkett added his own conditions and insisted that he be sent daily updates of the boys' actions. The terms on their release was that Thompson and Venables were not allowed to contact each other or James's family. They also weren't allowed to return to the Merseyside region, had curfews implemented on them, and had to report to probation officers. If they broke any of the rules, they would be sent back to prison. A court injunction was imposed on the media, preventing them from releasing any details about Thompson and Venables. In 2001, Plunkett said the injunction was granted because there was a real and strong possibility that their lives would be at risk if their identities become known. After the trial and the birth of their second son, James Bulger's parents, Ralph and Denise Bulger's marriage broke down, with them getting a divorce in 1995, presumably from the stress of everything. On March 14, 2008, James's mother Denise and a woman named Esther Ranson, who is an English journalist, had a memorial garden created at Sacred Heart Primary School in James's hometown of Kirkby, the school James was expected to attend if he had not been murdered. Even though there was a court order to protect Thompson and Venables' identities, details still leaked out into the press via the internet. Some information was real and some was fabricated. Over the years, several people have posted pictures of men online claiming that they were Thompson or Venables and have been arrested because of the court order, with people being sentenced to jail or prison time for spreading the photos. On the other end of things, there have even been people who trolled and stalked James's mother, with a woman in July of 2016 sending a picture to James's mother on Twitter, posing as one of the killers, with a depiction of James's ghost, a truly despicable act. After Venables' release, he began living independently in March of 2002. After a period of reduced supervision, he began excessively drinking, taking drugs, and downloading inappropriate images involving CP. He was able to keep the CP a secret for the time being. He also visited Merseyside, which was against the release stipulations. Venables was also arrested outside of a nightclub for fighting, but claimed it was self-defense. The charges were later dropped after taking an alcohol awareness course, but just 3 months later, he was arrested for being in possession of cocaine. In 2005, when 23-year-old Venables' probation officer met another one of his girlfriends, who was 17, it was presumed Venables was having a delayed adolescence due to the number of young girlfriends he had. In February of 2010, Venables contacted his probation officer and reported that he feared that his new identity had been revealed at work. Officers then made their way to his home. When they arrived at Venables' home, they saw him trying to attempt to destroy the hard drive from his computer with a knife and a can opener. The officers found this suspicious, so they took his computer. When the officers examined Venables' computer, they found a disturbing collection of CP material featuring essay of children as young as 2 years old by adults, along with other vile content. On March 2, 2010, Venables was to be returned to prison for an unspecified violation, with Justice Secretary Jack Straw stating that Venables was returning for extremely serious allegations. I wonder what for? Also stating that he was unable to give further details of the reasons for John Venables' return to custody because it was not in the public interest to do so. On March 7, 2010, media reports revealed it was due to graphic CP on his computer. And why wasn't that in the public's interest to know? Yeah, whatever you say, Jack Straw. On July 23, 2010, Venables appeared in a court through a video only visible by the judge hearing the case. He pleaded guilty and was sentenced to an additional 2 years in prison. On September 3, 2013, Venables was released from prison with a new identity. Man, the British court system really likes protecting this guy. On November 23, 2017, Venables was caught yet again with CP and related materials and sentenced to another 3 years and 4 months in prison, yet again proving that the UK has atrociously and disgustingly light sentences for these types of charges. He was denied parole in September of 2020 and again in December of 2023, with the parole board saying that the panel was not satisfied that released at this point would be safe for the protection of the public. Well, at least the UK court got something right. In March of 2019, James's father Ralph Bulger challenged the lift of the lifelong order protecting Venables and lost. with Judge Andrew McFarland stating that it could cause Venables to be violently hurt or killed. In late 2019, British officials thought about resettling Venables in Canada, Australia, or New Zealand. This is because of the high cost of protecting his identity. British authorities said they had spent over £65,000, which is around 83,000 US dollars. These countries refused to let this happen, with the Prime Minister of New Zealand even saying not to bother applying. Thompson has never been heard from again, and his identity is still hidden. That's the end of the story of James Bulger, one of the most horrific murders in not only the UK's history, but in the world. When a murder involves children hurting other children, it adds a whole new disturbing aspect to the equation. These boys were sadistic and demented. It's hard for anyone to even comprehend. So what do you think they should have done with the boys? Do you think the sentencing was too light or too heavy for children to go through an adult trial? Should they have kept their identity secret? Comment below and let me know what you think. Thanks so much for watching, and please like, subscribe, and hit the bell notification so you don't miss any reality we've dredged up for you. I'll see you next time with some more crazy facts, mysteries, and scary stories we've dredged from reality.